The best heroes have gadgets. Batman and Spider-Man, two of the biggest superheroes ever, both have them. But Batman is depressing, so today on Top 10 Nerd, we're gonna go over the top 10 most useful Spider-Man gadgets. Be sure to tell me your favorite gadget-wielding superhero down in the comments below. And in at number 10, the spider signal. Yes, Spider-Man has a spider signal, but unlike the bat signal that alerts and calls him, the spider signal is a light contained in Spider-Man's belt that projects an image of Spider-Man's mask, or his symbol, I guess. Now, for the most part, the spider signal is used mostly to announce his arrival to or intimidate criminals, but much more practically, it can be used as a flashlight when Peter finds himself having to navigate dark areas like the sewers. I think most people in the world know the usefulness of a flashlight. Well, imagine one being built into your belt. Then it's hands-free without being strapped to your forehead, making you look ridiculous. But wait, there's more. In Amazing Spider-Man number 675, Peter upgrades his basic tool even further, giving it a UV light to scan crime scenes for forensic evidence. My only issue with the spider signal as a flashlight is that it's red, and that's the darkest color of light, so maybe I'm wrong here, but I just don't know how useful it would totally be, but it does seem extremely bright in the comics, so what do I know? I just work here. I don't know. Number 9, his camera. Back in the day, and for a long while, Peter Parker was not exactly flush with the cash. He was struggling to make ends meet, and one of the ways he did that was by taking pictures for the Daily Bugle and J. Jonah Jameson, who, as we all know, wants pictures of Spider-Man because he's a menace. You know what I'm doing. Well, seeing as Peter is Spider-Man, who better to take those pictures? Peter used his inventive skills to create a camera that he kept in his utility belt that had a whole whack of features. Originally, using his father's film camera that he modified and would stick to walls, it had a spinning lens and later on added motion sensors so that it would automatically take pictures when he swung by. Now naturally, as time has gone on and technology in general has advanced, so have his cameras. And obviously, he goes digital now. He eventually switched to a smaller camera built into his utility belt so he can take pictures hands-free, and he also set it to automatically take photos on its own, so now he can get all the best pictures for Jonah without having to worry about it in the middle of combat. Number 8, Webwear. With great power comes greater speed, storage, and battery life. Welcome to Webwear from Parker Industries, now available worldwide, bringing you affordable internet access with clear reception and unlimited data. Anywhere on Earth. Webwear, when you're ready to master the web. From your pals at Parker Industries. And Webwear did exactly what it said on the tin. Webwear was a wrist-mounted device mass-produced by Parker Industries and sold across the globe that allowed individuals who own it to have affordable internet access with clear reception and unlimited data anywhere on Earth. It was waterproof and outfitted with a GPS similar to what Spider-Man uses on his spider tracers. It was also pretty secure, using a nanotechnological computer to keep things safe. But not forever. The problem with being an incredibly smart superhero is that your best villains are also incredibly smart. The group Zodiac made a couple attempts to crack it, the first of which tipped S.H.I.E.L.D. off to their whereabouts, but eventually they figured it out. But the bigger problem came in the form of Doc Ock, and more specifically, the Superior Octopus, who cracked the code and was working with Hydra to try and take control of the company, which caused Peter to shut down Webwear everywhere. But without supervillains, this would be an incredibly useful thing. Number 7, the Spidermobile. The idea of a spider-themed car for a spider-themed hero who doesn't really have much issue getting from place to place does seem kind of ridiculous. And it is, because the introduction of the Spidermobile was initially just to sell toys. That is something that comes hand in hand with comic books. Is it still cool? Yeah. Has it gotten cooler over time? Absolutely. Because Peter was struggling with rent, he decided to begrudgingly accept an offer from advertising executives to drive a car as Spider-Man that would use a non-polluting Corona Motors engine. With help from his best bud Johnny Storm, the Human Torch, Peter built a car from scratch. Actually, it was basically Johnny who did all of it himself, but the Spidermobile was basically a dune buggy that was all spider themed, could drive up walls, had spider signal headlights, an ejector seat, and web shooters. It came to us in Amazing Spider-Man issue 130, which also introduced us to the idea of Aunt May and Doc Ock getting married, so it was just an all-around wild ride. The funny thing is that being a teenage New Yorker in Manhattan, Peter Parker hadn't had the need to learn to drive, and thanks to Mysterio, he drove the buggy into the Hudson River. We did get a second one when Peter became the owner of Parker Industries, and this one was sport car themed with web fluid airbags, a voice operated computer system, and the ability to drive along sheer surfaces or upside down, plus the ability to unfold its wheels into spider-like legs. Much cooler. And fun fact, the original Spidermobile was reclaimed by Deadpool, who turned it into the Dead Buggy. Number 6, the Spider Glider. After years and years and years of fighting a goblin-themed villain who flew around on a glider, and after becoming the head of Parker Industries, Spider-Man decided it was his turn to get a glider, and in Amazing Spider-Man 682, that's what we got. Utilizing the glider and the thermoreactive foam he developed to take down Equinox. It also helped him to clear traffic to help save a man's foot. But if we were to pick a source of transportation for Spider-Man between the glider and the Spidermobile, I gotta say, the glider kinda wins out. With this glider, Spider-Man can actually fly, which is something some villains kind of had over him unless he could use his webs to bring them down. And the Spider Glider has returned a few times because of how useful it actually is. In issue 697 of Amazing Spider-Man, Peter used an improved Spider Glider to help him fight against Roderick Kingsley and Phil Urich, the Hobgoblins. Otto Octavius as Superior Spider-Man also gave his goons versions of the Spider Glider, and even more recently, in the 2022 Amazing Spider-Man number 7, Norman Osborn, who is reformed, gave Peter some new equipment, including a glider that could turn into a backpack, which Peter used facing the Vulture. And in at number 5, web wings. The past 2 entries on this list have to do with travel, and while the Spider Glider and the Spidermobile were both vehicles and kind of accessories that Peter would ride, the web wings were an integral part of his suit for years. The simple idea of a web under the arms that allow Peter to glide for short periods of time just adds so many other methods of traversal for Spider-Man. Now, the web wings did disappear from the suit in 1966 when John Romita Sr. took over art for Spider-Man, but they were such a classic that other versions of the suit since then have included these little underarm wings. Now, of course, I do kind of doubt how useful they would really be in the real world. I'm pretty sure they would need to be much bigger in order for it to actually work. If you've ever seen a real world wingsuit, then you know these wings are much more cumbersome than the sleek little wings attached to Peter's suit. But it's a comic book. We left realism at the door a long time ago. I like the web wings, and if you don't, well, let's talk about it in the comments. Number 4, the Spider Tracers. Back to the classics. The Spider Tracers have been around since all the way back in Amazing Spider-Man issue 11 from 1964, and they're probably the most simple thing Spider-Man has got outside of his camera. Essentially, the tracers are trackers. Peter can throw them, fire them from his web shooters, or plant them on an escaping villain in order to track them with a receiver and take them down at their base of operations. Now, not too long after they appeared, Peter upgraded the tracers to allow them to emit a signal that he can pick up with his spider sense, making the receiver only necessary if the tracer gets too far away. Ben Reilly would later develop his own tracers that were like a micro dot, and I could see that being even more useful. But the downside to these tracers come in a couple of different ways. They have been used against Spider-Man to lure him into traps, and villains who were smart enough were able to adjust the signal to the point that it overloaded Peter's spider sense. Now, after Peter Parker began working with Horizon Labs, Spider-Man made new and improved spider tracers with listening devices, GPS, and camouflage. And then he went even further, modifying them to be effective in combat, specifically against Hydra Man, by freezing him solid with a cryogenic spider tracer. And we aren't quite done yet, because with Parker Industries, Peter built an even more improved version of the spider tracer, which he made available for commercial use. But in my opinion, it's a bit of a ripoff, because the original spider tracers cost $20 to create. The Parker Industries version cost $16.23 to manufacture, but they're sold for $49.99. It did inspire Deadpool's Deadpool tracker though, so there's that. Number 3, Spiderbots. The Spiderbots are not actually a creation of Peter himself, but they just make so much sense that it's kind of surprising they haven't been made before. When Doc Ock took over Peter's body and became the Superior Spider-Man, he used his incredible brain to create not only a whole new spider suit, but a bunch of advanced gadgets to use in his superhero activities. The Spiderbots were among among them. Using these little robots, he was able to surveil the city from anywhere, with the bot sending images straight to his suit's lenses, his phone, his tablet, and his TV. He could also control them with his mind, which is something we should expect, as that's his whole shtick with his mechanical arms. What's even cooler is that they can project images, and when a bunch of them are working together, they can even create force fields, which is a whole different level of useful all on its own. It's incredibly strange to me that Peter never really uses these bots when he gets his body back. It's like specifically a superior Spider-Man bit of tech, but it's so cool. Number 2. Thermoreactive Foam. Remember when I said Spider-Man got the spider glider and fought Equinox? Well, Equinox was a hero and sometimes villain who had the powers of both Johnny Storm, the Human Torch, and Bobby Drake, the X-Men's Iceman. Which, first off, let me just say, Equinox should be a way bigger threat with that kind of capability. He can shoot fire with one hand and ice with the other. It's super cool. Or hot. God, I'm sorry. Peter Parker had to come up with some new tech in order to face this foe. So, to keep up with the Goblin theme, Spider-Man constructed some spider bombs that contained thermoreactive foam developed by Peter himself. As he describes it, it keeps hot stuff cool and cool stuff hot, which just reminds me of Icy Hot. But after throwing these at Equinox, it both extinguished his flames and melted his ice. A genius invention that Peter even claimed he was planning to donate to first responders in the city, most importantly, firefighters. Spider-Man is a man of the people. And finally, in at number 1 is the web shooters and the web fluid. I think most of us can agree that Spider-Man's most used and most important gadget of everything he's created would have to be his web shooters and the web fluid that the shooters use. When I was a kid, thanks to the Tobey Maguire films that got me into Spider-Man, I just assumed that the webs that Spider-Man used actually came out of his body. It's something a spider can do, and Spider-Man is supposed to do everything a spider can do, so it just made sense. But it wasn't until I was older that I realized how icky that actually is. Okay, it's a little cool, but what is way cooler and says a lot about the character of Peter Parker is that he used his ingenuity and genius to create his own web shooters and a chemical that was strong enough to allow him to web up criminals, defend himself, swing from building to building, and the hundreds of other things Spider-Man has used his webs for over his long comic book history. Thanks to different amounts of pressure, he can differ the density and speed of his webs, and with different adjustments to the web formula, he has been able to have acid, ice, cement, foam, and lead versions of his webs, and he's even created special magnetic and electrified variations. On top of showcasing his ingenuity, his webs are crucially a non-lethal weapon, choosing to catch, disarm, repair, and restrain rather than do any damage, which stands in line with everything Peter and Spider-Man stands for. And that's all the time we have for today. I'm Adam Andrews, this is Top 10 Nerd, and I'll catch you all on the flippy flop. Peace out, nerds!